what's my favorite book here? We got the Be Nimble and we got the Be Visionary. Now let's talk about the differences.
Well, now you got Be Different. Now you got Be Different. That just came out on pre-sale about 3 months ago.
Hey, congrats! But it's coming out
Nice.
this summer, right?
Yes.
Okay,
The
cool.
Yes.
trifecta is there.
The trifecta. So let's talk about the difference between being nimble and being visionary. Okay. So from what I understand, being nimble is being able to adapt to the environment. That's what makes us so
Yeah.
cool as human beings. Now being visionary is having the vision for the future. So how do they work together?
Well, you can be nimble and walk right into a raging fire or drop off a cliff if you don't have any vision, right? So, you can work real well, you can optimize, you can grind away and all that, but you might be going in the wrong direction or doing the wrong things. So the visionary part is the way to lift your head up off the tips of your toes and look out at the horizon and do a 360-degree kind of situational awareness check and say, what are my competitors doing? What are the opportunities out there? What are the threats? Am I aiming in the right direction? Am I aiming high enough, too high, too low, too far to the left? And then you start to make a plan to go in the right direction. And then that informs the nimble reaction and the leadership and the operational planning that is required to actually put a strategy in motion.
Now, can you give us an example or a story of how you worked with a business on this concept and how it led to their success?
So let's say I have a medical company that I'm the CEO of right now, but I
Mm-hmm.
acquired it. It only had one employee and 26 doctors and nurses, and it was only working in one city. So I looked at it and I thought, all right, I understood the business, I understood the business model, I understood the market environment. But what I thought was missing in everybody else's discussions that I talked to about the healthcare market was the flexibility, the ability to surge and scale rapidly using independent contractor models and using maximum flexibility for the providers themselves. Instead of trying to lock them down into a 40-hour work week, bring them in and say, what if I let you kind of work your own flex hours so you have autonomy over your medical practice, you have flexibility in dealing with the patient's needs and with the client facilities requirements, but you can negotiate all that on your own. You want to go play golf, you want to work for a nonprofit, you want to have your own private practice, that's fine. We'll just kind of work it out between the two of us. We'll match what the clients and patients' needs are against your desire to have kind of a work-life flexibility. And so rather than, and this is 7, 8 years ago, so rather than just going straight old school, 40 hours a week, you're an employee, this is the way you have to do it. I went that direction. And it also allowed me to stretch out the horizon a little bit. What was the art of the possible? Because if you have to hire people, it's expensive and you scale very slowly and you burn a lot of cash. In this other model, you could actually scale pretty rapidly. And then if everybody's willing to play in a network, you can put a network around a particular geographic location and they all can start helping each other, vacations, weekend coverage, all this.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
we took that one little company and we scaled it and grew it rapidly, and it's still growing today.
Wow. Wow. And it's a bit by trusting the employees. And then also another factor, taking risks. Now, this is something I'm horrified of taking risks. I mean, it's such a, because if you risk, you can succeed and you can fail. However, you cannot succeed unless you take risks. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean it's the old saying, nothing ventured, nothing gained. It's true. I mean, you can protect what you have and hold on to what you have, and you might get lucky, and the universe isn't going to change the value of what you have, or you know erode that value over time. But it's kind of, if you have no risk tolerance and you take the proceeds of a sale of a company, you stick it in your mattress for 20 years, you and you check every couple of years and it's always there. At the end of 20 years, because of inflation, you lost a lot of buying power. It's an invisible
Wow.
thief, but you
Mm-hmm.
felt like that was the safe play. That was the low risk play. And in reality, you actually risked X percentage of it that compounded over the course of those 20 years. So risk is a perception and it can be calculated, but at some point you have to take the leap. And that's where, leadership and the kind of the courage of leadership comes into play. And I don't mean like leaping off of a cliff with a blindfold on. You calculate it to the point where you think you've got about an 85% chance of having all the assumptions and all the pieces and parts going the way you want them to go. Then you jump in and you execute, and you basically stay on the balls of your feet, and you wait and you look and you pay attention. You don't take anything for granted, because something will change. That other 15% is going to come and bite you, and you have to be prepared for that. Not only that, the 85% that you've rested all your assumptions on, that's also like quicksand sometimes. It's starting to erode, fall apart. And so you're shoring up what you thought was solid, and you're dealing with the things that you didn't know as you're knowing them. And that's kind of what makes business fun and challenging. It's almost like you get ready to fight an opponent in a boxing match, and you get in there and a judo guy shows up. And you're like, oh, okay. Well, it's still a combat event. There's still a ring. There's still scoring and all that, but you didn't train for judo. You trained for boxing. And now what are you going to do? And, so you have to adapt, and you have to figure it out. A lot of aspects of business are like that.
Gotcha.
That's true.
Saeed?
And so you mentioned obviously that in the 15% that a crisis might arise, an unexpected event, something that unforeseen happens. So my question would be, what is a crisis that got you really thinking when you were working in the business field, and how did you find a way to resolve it?
Well, COVID is definitely a good example. I'm sure everybody uses that, but I have a little bit different take on it. So at the time, I was CEO of a larger enterprise that had some government contracting companies and had the medical company. And we actually got through 2020 no problem. COVID really didn't hurt us very, very badly. And our healthcare company actually was doing so well. Our chief medical officer was tapped to be on the governor's council trying to solve the problem statewide. So,
oh, wow.
We thought we kind of skated through that whole 2020 event. And we were easily adaptable to remote activity, remote management, remote operations.
Yeah.
So that didn't even bite us. We had a 14,000 square foot headquarters building that was empty for 12 months, except for me playing cornhole by myself. I won all the time, by the way. I don't have any witnesses. I don't have any witnesses. But I was really doing really, really well. And then in September 21, the administration came out in the afternoon, I think it was the 17th of September, and announced that if you were in the government contracting business, if you were in the military, and if you were in the healthcare business, if you didn't get the vaccine by such and such a date, you were fired. You're done.
Ooh.
Well, I had 500 government contracting employees, and I had 90 doctors and nurses. So here we had gone all through 2020, almost to the end of 2021, and the black swan event for us wasn't the original illness. It wasn't the original reactions and shutdowns and all that. It was the administration. So we started dealing with that, and then the governor of our state came out on January 2nd of 2022, 2 weeks before he was leaving office as the governor, and shut down all elective surgeries in all hospitals in the state of Virginia. Well, that was the feeder down to all of our buildings. And so we went through this 4-month crisis, and it was reversed by the new governor. But by the time the governor got in there and signed an executive order to reverse it, the damage had been done. So the whole first 4 months of every hospital, because that's where they get all their profitability from, is elective surgery. So those were two things that had nothing to do with the virus per se. It had nothing to do with all the things that the press kind of focused on related to the crisis of the pandemic. These were both things that came from the U.S. government, and they were kind of weird things that, eventually they never did hold the government contractors to the vaccine thing. Every month they kept moving the date, so every month, the threat was still there. So we went the day after that news conference. We had about 90% of the 500 said they weren't going to do it. And about 35-40% of the doctors and nurses said they weren't going to do it. So we essentially, the entire structure, 3 companies were all just going to implode, all because of one press conference. So that's the worst thing I've seen, because it was almost like a meteorite coming out of nowhere with no warning and just hitting you, and you weren't planning for it. You weren't ready for it. You weren't even looking that way. And so we had to scramble, and we had to kind of start from scratch. And we created portfolio briefings for every one of our clients, and we ran around briefing them and telling them how we were going to try to retain everybody. We had conference calls with our chief medical officer talking to our government contracting employees who were freaking out about, in most cases, not with good cause, but there was not a lot of information out there. So he was holding their hands, so to speak, every couple of nights a week until they were done asking questions, which helped them then pass the word to everybody else that didn't sit in on it. So it was a very wild and crazy kind of thing that hit us. And then the next day we just rolled up our sleeves, reorganized a little bit, put a team just focusing on this and nothing but this for the next 4 months.
Wow, that shows a lot of resilience in that time as well, like from your
Yeah,
side.
of course, as a SEAL, that 85% thing, you're always told this is what's going to happen. This is the weather. This is the situation. This is how many bad guys are going to be there. Blah 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 blah, and you're gonna fly in with this kind of helicopter, or you're gonna fly in with this kind of airplane, or you're going on a boat. And then about 6 hours before that, they go, "Nah, it's not gonna be a helicopter. It's gonna be a boat, or it's not gonna be a boat. It's gonna be an airplane. You're jumping instead of stepping out of the back of a helicopter." And then the weather changes, and then somebody gets lost. And you end up on a mountaintop instead of a beach, and now you got to walk for like 16 hours with all this gear on you. And you get there, instead of 2 guys and a couple of pet ducks, you've got 40 guys and guard dogs. And
Wow.
So I mean, that's the reality of special operations missions. So you do all this fancy planning like in the movies, and you brief like this is how it's going to happen. Like precision. And Bob's going to go left, and Joe's going to go right, and at exactly this amount of time, a plane's going to fly over and distract him, and everything's just going to be perfect. And they give you the Omni Domini and says, "You guys are good, go," and then you show up and you do whatever you have to do to get the job done. So it's good training for business.
And it kind of, everything really translate. I'm curious what was your preference, water, air, or ground? What was your favorite and least favorite?
My preference was, air is fun.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part. You're training to skydive. You have to skydive at night with gear on sometimes, but to get together and have to be able to fly together in a precision team in a unit in the air, it takes lots and lots of practice. 400, 500, 600 jumps. I have a little over 750 skydives.
Wow.
So a lot of that was fun. And the water stuff was always cold.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, if you do a mission where you're diving in the Caribbean, and this is absolutely true, I've lived this a million times, and you're wearing a pair of camouflage fatigues, and you've got your diving gear, and you got all your combat gear, rig, and your body armor, and everything, and you go underwater, and 2 hours later you pop up under a ship in Puerto Rico, you've got hypothermia, because the whole time you were swimming, you've been expending energy and sweating.
Yeah.
And the whole time you've been in the water's been sucking energy away from your body. And so you get there and you're like this. You can't even put a bullet in a cylinder in a gun. It's debilitating. So
wow.
Most SEALs will tell you that while water is kind of what makes us special, water is also what they used to punish us when they first trained us. And it's always there waiting for us. And Mother Nature with water is a whole different story, because that's always fun. It's never the way you think it's going to be. The waves are always twice as big as they tell you they're going to be, and the current's twice as strong.
Seems like the 50% is way more common than the 85%. It's like should be reversed.
Well, yeah, but you start out thinking you've got 85% wired. We actually, in Be Nimble, I think I have a chapter called the 85% rule, but it's try to get to 85% of understanding and awareness and knowledge, and at least have a game plan based on 85%, and then go for it. Because the reason why people don't take risks, and why a lot of companies don't take risks, they just kind of sit there and hover, and their stretch goal is 5% for the next year, right? Let's just keep doing what we're doing, but 5% more of it. Not let's change what we're doing. Let's just do 5% more of the same thing. It's because they're looking for some kind of perfect analysis, some kind of perfect calculation, a perfect data set. And, even if they got to 95, it wouldn't be perfect. 98% is not perfect. So there's a law in physics that the closer you get to 100%, the resistance that's left starts to increase exponentially. So you can get to like 60% pretty fast of understanding knowledge, et cetera, or the task being completed. And as you start getting, it's like almost like a compression of air kind of thing. You get closer and closer, and you get slower and slower.
Yeah.
And that means you're expending more and more resources, more time. You're losing opportunity time. And if you're sitting there trying to fight for that last 10% to get perfect, and you're competing against companies that are going to 85 or 90%, they're jumping you, they're leapfrogging you in the market. And you suddenly have to stop doing what you're doing because it's obsolete, and you got to start all over again with some new product or new service, or going to a new market area. And if you haven't been enlightened by the experience, you do the same thing all over again, and you get beat all over again.
Wow. It's like saying like staying ahead of the trends and like how they say in business. Um, Marty, I kind of want to go a bit off topic and ask you a question about your Navy SEALs career. And if you could share with us maybe a story, like a memorable operation that you were involved in, that obviously, if it's like you're allowed to share the information about it, if you can share a story about it, that'll be great to hear about.
Well, when I give speeches, I use a couple of stories to teach some points. Um, I talk a lot and I write a lot about intellectual humility, basically the ability to strip away the positive and the negative baggage that we all carry around. So think of it this way, all the rewards you just received, you have to clear that from your mind, or all the defeats you just experienced, you have to clear those from your mind. Because if you don't, either one of them are going to skew the way you're looking at the world today. You're either going to
Yeah.
be timid and concerned that you're going to fail again, or you're going to be arrogant and overconfident. And in one case, you're so timid that you don't want to take any risks and you're afraid of any new information because it's too risky. It's not known. It's not understood. On the other side, you don't care about any new information because you know it all. Same football play, different day. So you have to clear all that out. But the human part of this is the more you either fail or the more you succeed, it's really hard to stop thinking that way. It's extremely hard to stop thinking that way. So I had a period of time when I had 16 or 17 very successful combat missions as the commander of a group, and it was going off better than I would have ever expected. And in the SEAL teams, you don't really do all the magic as the officer in charge. It's the enlisted guys are all 10 times more experienced and qualified and capable than the officers are. Now, I was an enlisted SEAL for 10 years before I became an officer, so I had a little bit more knowledge than the average officer of that rank. But what really happens is you let the band do their thing and you're the conductor. And if everybody's doing their thing, you barely have to move your finger, like this. You don't have to give a lot
Yeah.
of harsh instructions or guidance or course corrections, right? And that's how we were flowing. And we'd been together for a year and a half prior to the first combat mission. So I planned a mission. We thought it was going to be a pretty straightforward mission coming in from the ocean across a swampy area and going in and grabbing an intelligence officer while he was sleeping in this kind of farmette. And once we grabbed him, we were going to call and the Army would come in with all the guys and everybody was going to do their thing and we were just going to back off. Went in with some rubber boats. The rubber boats got stuck about 200 yards off the beach. Turned out there was an 18-foot tidal change in the area. The tide was going out. The boats and all the gear and engines and fuel and everything we had in the boats, all probably about 1,400, 1,500 pounds. And so we got out of the boats, and there were two boats, and with mud up to our chest, we were moving the boats about 6 inches at a time, pushing through the mud with our bodies 6 inches at a time. So we got inserted around 8:45 in the evening, and we hit the beach at about 2 o'clock in the morning from 100,
Wow.
150, 200 yards out. And we were
That's
completely
insane.
spent. We were done. We had no energy left. And it was a warm country, so we didn't have the cold hurting us or anything. So then we took the boats and we walked them down to where the swamp was, and there was supposed to be a river that came out of the mainland through the swamp and into the ocean. So we were going to take the boats in there,
You
and
guys
this
carried the boats.
river
Yeah.
went right by where the bad guy. Yeah, the river went right by where the bad guy was. Right. So this is okay. We're back on track. We start, and it's pitch black. So we take off into this mangrove swamp, And we only get about 300-400 yards back in there, and there was no water over the top of the mud there either. So then we had to tie the boats off to the mango trees and start going through the swamp. And mango trees have roots that look like the fins off of rockets, and they're all interlocking like this. And so it's like an obstacle course. We're climbing up and over, up and over. Everybody's helping everybody. 16
Yeah.
guys carrying about 105 pounds of equipment, guns, bullets, with
Oh my
about
God.
45 or 50 pounds of mud stuck to us. And then I realized I was lost. And it was about 3:30 in the morning. So I took a shot to try to get perpendicular to the swamp, get out of the swamp. I got out of the swamp, but I didn't actually go perpendicular. I ended up curving like this. And when we came out of the swamp, we were standing on the beach and there was the ocean.
Wow.
So I'd gone into the swamp, did a complete U-turn, ended up right back pretty much where we started. But except the boats weren't with us. They were still in the middle of the swamp. Now, at that point, my self-confidence was shattered. And the other problem was everybody in the world was watching this mission because this guy was a very important guy. And so the integrity of the SEALs, everything was hanging on this. There was like generals watching this thing. So how could we get it back together again? And I got together with my guys, and we said, well, we'll just have to find another way to this place. And we started walking, and we ran across this little dirt road that wasn't on a map, but it was going in the right direction. So I passed the word back and said, we're going to start running. And so from about 3:45 in the morning to 5:30 in the morning, we were running with all that gear, all that mud on us, nonstop. And my point element, then the fog came in, and my point element ran into a fence eventually around 5:25. The time we were supposed to hit the compound was 5:30. And everybody was staged out there waiting, the helicopter, everybody was all ready to go. They come in as soon as the SEALs did their thing. And it turned out that it was the compound. And so I just said, go, 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 go. And we kept running and ran into the compound, took the compound down, grabbed the guy. And I sent out the code word to everybody saying, we have the guy. And then they all came in. They came in vehicles, they came in helicopters and everything. And of course, from their perspective, it was just another Mission Impossible executed perfectly. And I was kind of amazed. It's one of those things like whatever happens in Vegas, you don't tell them what happened. Yeah, precision. We were, and we looked like, crap because we were covered in mud. And then one of the guys said, asked if we wanted to ride back on the helicopter. And I was about to say yes, and my senior enlisted guy grabbed me and pulled me aside, and he said, we still have to go get the boats. And so we declined the ride, and we walked back down the road and tried to guess where we came out, went back into the swamp, and around noon we found the boats. And then but the tide was up, so we were able to take the boats and actually paddle them a little ways and motor them out.
Yeah.
And when I usually tell that story, I talk about how I was not doing things that I should have been doing to make sure that my plan was going to be executed with a lot of kind of cross checks as I was moving along the plan. I just went with the plan because we always did well. Everything was going great. My arrogance got me into a position where I just went with the plan, then I doubled down on the plan. And these kinds of things, you second guess them all the time. You think back, well, what if we just anchored the boats and swam into the beach? We would have saved 3 hours of hauling the boats in. We could have done that. What if we, when we came back out of this, or when we got to the beach, what if we just took the boats and hit them in the swamp, looked for the road then that ran down? We would have got there 2 hours early. I didn't do any of those things because I was going to stick to the plan because I was such a great planner, and we were going to do the plan. The Marty plan was going to be the plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned from that I needed to take every mission challenge and completely clear my mind of all the sense of confidence and that everything that I came up with as a plan was perfect. And I had to go back to being very humble and start thinking about lots of contingencies and what ifs, not because I was going to second guess to the point where I was depressed and sad, but I could put certain things into missions to make sure that, and cross-check where I am, what am I doing? Is this the right thing? And then not double down on a plan that's going bad.
Yeah.
And so that was a lesson I learned from that. And it's the same thing in business. There's a point where you don't want to reinforce the defeat. You have to just stop and say, okay, this isn't working anymore, even though it worked for the last 3 years. Or this person was great in that position for the last 3 years, but something's changed. The market's changed. The competition's changed. The pace, the speed, the technology you're using. Now they're having a hell of a time, and they're the wrong person now.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to face up to it rather than enable it and double down on it. You just have to figure it out.
Wow,
How's that
that's
sound?
That's
That
that's a
work?
great story.
profound. Yeah, what a
Yeah.
wonderful story. That's ingrained. Mhm.
Marty, I want to ask, since we're talking about like military business, I keep hearing like, I mean, obviously you always talk about how they're very similar, and it translates a lot from the military to the business world. What are the specific skill sets or tools that you acquire in the military that directly apply to business? What is it about it that makes military men successful in the business world?
There's a couple of things that, and I think sports, obviously law enforcement, EMS, first
Mm.
responder types have the same experience. You learn to go into stressful situations. You learn to trust your own capabilities. You learn to trust the capabilities of the team you're in.
Yeah.
And then you personally try to improve your capabilities. And at the same time, the team's trying to improve their collective capabilities. And it never ends until the day you retire or quit the job. So there's
Yeah.
always this collective and individual push to to optimize or to improve or to become faster or stronger or smarter because you owe it to yourself, but you owe it to the other guys around you. So you have a
Yeah.
secondary requirement there. It's not just about how good you are, but you don't want to let somebody else down. They don't let you down. So that's an interesting thing. It happens in sports and it happens in these kind of high stress, competitive, and high risk professions. And it's not something that you would normally see in the commercial market because if it's not high stress and it's not, people throw out the word teams all the time. I remember in the late 80s when all the books started coming out about teams this and teams that. Really, they were just committees. Nobody on the team was going to lose their job if the team came up with a bad idea. I mean, if you're a team and you go out on the field and the team loses, the whole team loses. It's not just the one person, it's the whole team, the whole collective
Right.
loses. If
Yeah.
you're in combat and you get your ass handed to it and people get hurt and all that, the whole team loses. So that you don't see that in businesses. The CEOs get fired, one wrongdoer gets fired, but you don't usually see somebody come in and say the entire automotive division is gone because they didn't meet their numbers this year. I mean, that
Yeah.
would be the equivalent. Then you're really a team because then you're all pulling together because you've got a real concern about the prospects of that unit, and the only thing that's going to mitigate a negative outcome is for you to figure out a way to get smarter, stronger, and
Mhm.
faster. So that is something that I've tried. I mean, I've been in business quite a while. I've tried to do it. It's very difficult because you're dealing with adults that have already kind of gone through a lot of their maturation and their
Mhm.
personality shaping years, and to try to
Yeah.
convert them into somebody who doesn't jump in their car at 4:55 and race off to whatever they want to do and leave the rest of the project team back there wondering what happened, where's Phil. It's very difficult because that's not the way they're brought up, quote unquote, in business. They're brought up that they should get smarter, they should get faster, they should get stronger for their own benefit
Yeah.
so that they can move up, right? Get paid more, get promotions, etc. So that's something that makes people from the military or these other organizations I mentioned better at team-oriented outcomes in business. The other thing is the psychological resilience of being in a high-risk situation. It's a thing you can train to. You can train to it in business too. You don't start being a SEAL or a firefighter or fighter pilot on day one doing the worst possible, scariest thing you're going to do. You start off in little baby steps. They take you to the edge of something you probably haven't done before. You test your courage, you test your resolve, you go through it. There's a little bit of a psychological, emotional kind of change in the way you look at things. And then you say, okay, I'm good. And then all of a sudden they give you something a little bit harder and a little bit scarier. And so you do that. Okay, I'm good. And then eventually you realize, well, this training is leading just to, it's never going to not be scarier, harder, or worse. And so you rather than succumb to it, you evolve into a very poised and very calm kind of an animal. You're very comfortable
Yeah.
with the fact that things are about to get bad or things are about to change in a way you can't control. And that, if you put somebody like that in business, when something goes wrong in the business, and you have 5 people at a table and 2 of them are ex-Marines, the 2 ex-Marines are looking around saying, so what are we going to do? And the other 3 people are going, I'm going to lose my job. What's going to happen? Yeah, what's going to happen to me? And the 2 Marines are going, what are we going to do? See that dynamic,
Yes,
and
The phrasing
and
matters.
and there's civilians I've seen that have come from really great organizations that taught a team approach and taught people to learn how to deal with the risks before they happen, like scenario play. And
Yeah.
they act the same way as Marines. They're like, let's roll our sleeves up, let's make this happen. So it's not just a military thing; it's a
right.
mindset
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
the commercial world doesn't really appreciate and train to. They all demand it of people, but they don't really train to it. So those are the things that convey. The things that don't convey is in the military is everybody's got a specialty. Everybody's got a profile, especially in the SEAL teams.
Yeah.
And you might speak 4 languages, and you might have all these other capabilities and technological skills and schools you went to and all that. Let's say your name's Joe. If Joe breaks his leg and he's in my unit, I just walk down the hallway, knock on the door. I need another Joe, and like a Pez dispenser. Some guy named Jack who has the exact same background, same amount of years of experience and everything, walks down and takes Joe's place. I don't have to go to Career Builder. I don't have to go on LinkedIn looking for somebody that might be like Joe. I don't have to hire somebody and hope he'll be like Joe. I just get a guy who looks just like Joe and is just as good as Joe. And that obviously doesn't convey, because in the regular world, hiring is like rolling the dice
Right.
at every level, from the top to the bottom. You don't know, and people are pretty good at interviewing these days. And
Yeah.
resumes are, you can have an AI write your resume, and so it's harder and harder to filter out
hmm
key personality traits and motivations and intentions and all that kind of stuff, or the ability you can't really look at them and say, I wonder how this person's going to work in a team for the project, how they can work with their peers. So you end up taking a shot at it, and 50% of the time you're wrong.
Oh
Wow.
wow. 50%.
That's a lot. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, that's rolling the dice. That's gambling. I mean, I want to ask you about leadership qualities in a team. Do you think having everyone have leadership qualities is good, or do you think only the leader should have leadership qualities? Yeah.
I think everybody should be taught what leadership is and taught how to lead for a couple of reasons. One is empathy. The positive cultural impact of everybody understanding the mission, the direction, the vision, instead of just the leader. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
understanding the stakes instead of just the leader.
Mm-hmm.
What happens is everybody galvanizes because they all get it. They all start to realize what pressure is on the organization and obviously on the leader. But otherwise, the other kind of opposite of that effect is the leader takes all that in, keeps that to him or herself, and just turns around and pushes emotional bursts and blasts of directives down because they're under pressure. And everybody down there is just kicking back. They're having a nice week and everything. And suddenly, why is the world on fire all of a sudden?
I see.
Why do I have to come in and work this weekend? This is a bunch of BS. Why do I got to do? So leadership, and good leaders are usually good followers because they have the empathy because they've been there before.
Mm-hmm.
I know how hard it is to lead. If I'm not the person that's the best person to take charge, I immediately say, what do you need me to do? Because I know I've been in that role before.
I
And
see.
so another way you can kind of get people to learn a little bit about leadership is you try to create little micro projects and micro tasks, and you put different people in charge, regardless of the rank or title in the organization. It teaches those that are in charge that everybody has the capacity to lead.
Mm-hmm.
It also teaches them that somebody else could take your job because there's always somebody who can take your place. Leadership is not, you're not anointed by God because you got a title, you know. So in the military, you train your replacement. So in the military, you're always trying to train everybody to take your job because the potential in the military is you might get shot and they have to take your job. And so there's no stigma, there's nothing, you know, in training everybody else to do your job. In the commercial world, if I tell everybody I want you to train the junior accountant to be a senior accountant, the senior accountant's going, my job security is now threatened. I'm training my replacement. They plan on replacing me. There's a whole different psychology around it. They don't see that it strengthens the organization, it creates great bench strength and organizational resiliency. They don't see any of that. All they see is I'm the only person, and therefore I have great value here. If I train that other person, there'll be two. I'll have less value.
Wow.
Another psychological thing that's hard to deal with that you don't have to deal with in the military.
Right.
Mm.
Wow.
So there's a lot of psychological factors that the military completely ignore and just like balance out.
Yeah.
That's
Does
So
it
the
have to do with
vision-
like the ego then?
the ego.
Sorry, Ali, I'm interrupting. But
Go for
does
it.
On
it
the,
have to
on the
do with
military
like,
side or on the commercial side?
like yeah, like in the business side, is it all revolving around people's egos and just not being able to manage their own egos?
Yeah. You know, when I first started in the commercial world, I kind of held it against people. But the more I started understanding where they were coming from, I couldn't hold it against them.
Mm.
It's you know, like anything else. It's like a kid that's violent because the parents were violent and they let the kid be violent, and so they grew up to being a violent adult. You know, they've been conditioned to be afraid for their job. They've been conditioned, and you know what? They'll tell me 5 stories of where they were told to train somebody and that person replaced them. So that's their truth. They lived it. The
Yeah.
fact that I might not do that, well, that's a leap of faith on their part, right? So, so the ego is some of it's ego, but a lot of it's just the fear of failure, or the fear of being replaced or diminished, and that takes a long time to try to deal with. You've got to be a leader for a long time and get them to respect and trust you.
Yeah.
And they may have been in that situation too, and then the leader ends up getting, you know, removed or promoted away from the group, and now they're right back to where they were before, and their jobs at risk. So you can't really use the same paradigm of the military in those situations because it's not the military. It's not the whole structure is all thinking the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Whoa.
I had a question about the black swan. So we talked about it a bit earlier. It was originally coined for the financial crisis. And so nowadays we have many, many black swans all put together. COVID plus AI plus
Yeah.
the economy of the world plus the politics of the world, war, everything put together. So how are we supposed to plan for our future if everything is changing?
Well, a long time ago, I think it was the very first Superman movie. The arch villain Lex Luthor was quietly and secretly buying up all the land on the eastern side of the San Andreas Fault. Because his evil plan was to set off a nuclear weapon inside the fault and cause the whole rest of California to drop in the sea, and then he'd own all the waterfront property. So you can either
Sounds
you can
like
either
something similar to Bill Gates.
Oh my god.
well you can and in military strategy and operational planning is the same thing. You can set the ground and prepare the ground for battle. Sun Tzu had the same comments in the Art of War a long time ago. Better to prepare the ground, understand the ground way before you fight the battle. It doesn't mean that you're not going to fight the battle. You know you're going to fight the battle. You know the war is coming. So how do you prepare for it? So preparation is mental and intellectual engagement. It's also emotional engagement. So you look at these different things, and all those things you mentioned, Ali, may or may not affect everybody, you know, all of them in the same basket. But if you thought that there was going to be a supply chain impact, if you thought there was going to be an interest rate change, if you thought Well, how is it going to affect my business? And then you bring everybody in a room and you say, let's just throw it up on the board. What are all the things that could go wrong? If the interest rates go up, I was just having a conversation today about this. Before the interest rates started to pop, there was a flurry of buying in the real estate market. There was this big surge of real estate sales. I had one friend that had a power washing business and he was just making money hand over fist. And I had another friend who's a lawyer who runs a real estate, legal real estate mortgage type company. I mean, these guys were, they were going to buy Ferraris. I mean, everything was great. And then the interest rates started to change and it all came to a screeching halt. So what they were experiencing was like the 11th hour of a gold rush that was predictably going to end. Now, it didn't mean it was going to end forever. It just meant it wasn't going to be a gold rush forever. So what could they have done sitting back and looking at that and saying, that wasn't a black swan, right? But that means that you're overexposed in one lane, maybe because of one positive event, in this case, low interest rates, or it was low interest rates and the fear those interest rates weren't going to stay much lower, so we better grab what we can get now, right? To create this big surge. So you have to look at those things and you say, okay, so how do I prepare? How do I prepare for things staying the same, things getting worse, or things getting better? And you have to have a contingency plan for all three possibilities. And then your contingency plan, what kind of resources do I need? What kind of training do I need? What kind of people do I need? Am I positioned now in the right way or not? If not, how do I get to a position? So you kind of build the arc based on what kind of flood you think is going to hit you. But to just sit back and hope it all goes away, or hope that there's no way you get affected, well, that's almost a guarantee that you're going to get affected because you're just waiting to be a victim of it. You're waiting to blow in the wind kind of a thing. So that's how you deal with it. You deal with it proactively, intellectually first. And what happens is the emotional stability, the emotional confidence comes with the intellectual engagement of the problem. And if you bring all your people involved, they all start getting involved in it. And pretty soon, nobody's thinking about all the bad things. They're all thinking about how can we seize the moment? How can we take advantage of the opportunity?
Wow. Because while someone else is flailing about, you're prepared to take this opportunity.
Right. And it may be something as drastic as it's time to sell the company because what we're doing is about to get taken out by a new technology. And if we don't get ready to sell the company now, then we're going to be stuck with a company that's, half as valuable 4 years from now when this thing hits. It's a hard decision for people to make. It's a really hard decision. But then you hear a story about somebody who did it and you go, oh, what a genius. They got out at the right time, right? So so you're either a genius or you're the person that's selling what you own for half its value. And the difference between the two is being willing to pull the trigger because you've thought it through and this can't go on forever this way.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's time to do something else. So, and there's a lot. I mean, if anybody ever wants to know look at a story of the DuPont Corporation from the 20s all the way through, they reinvented what they did and who they were like 4 times because they had to. They were about to go under 4 times.
Wow.
And they found a wave to ride until the wave was about to dissipate. Then they jumped off and found another wave to ride just at the right time. And then there's other companies like Kodak and others that never did it. They never made the move. So you can do it. You can deal with all that stuff. We've been in crazy times before.
I see. Just be adaptable. Yeah.
Well, that's the be visionary part of that's the second book's message is stop thinking about tomorrow and stop thinking about yesterday and start thinking about 24 months from now.
Okay. So let's talk about that. Be visionary. How can you come up with a long-term vision? Because we're always caught up in the hustle of, we need to do this, and the short term, I have this to-do list to do, and you get busy with that. But like for example with this podcast, we've been working on this for a while. Me and Said were meeting up in Lebanon actually for our friend's wedding, and so we're going to be there in person, and we're going to have like a powwow. We've talked about this too. Have a vision, set goals for this podcast, have
a mind map as well.
A mind map, a mastermind, a vision board, all that. Okay. So how do you do that?
Well, you just told me how you do it. The only thing you didn't do is you didn't do peyote or something to get your spirit in there.
That's Ali. That's what we're missing out. We just need.
The
That's
one
what we just.
ingredient.
The one
Well,
last one, bro. Chemical
so
X.
you started the story. You started your story with the two of us sat down and decided we wanted to do something. So that's the key to most things in life is you have to sit down and start and decide to do something. You have to make a
Mhm.
decision. I,
Yeah.
I was talking to a guy who's a country western singer not too long ago, and he had a really serious decision to make. And he was talking to me. And I said, "Well, it sounds like you already know what you want to do. I said, you got a piece of paper? And I said, write down the decision. Just write it down in front of you, and then don't back off from that. And then the rest of it is just all the details." And so he did it, and he said he felt great after that. Well, yeah, because you've been looping up to the point of making a decision without making a
Yeah.
decision. So first, you got to make a decision, and it's a decision to try. It's a decision to risk something, time, money, um, relationships, whatever. And in the case of like the book, where I explain in the first couple of chapters how you do this, because most people don't know how to create a vision. They don't know how to dream. They did when they were kids, but it was all beat out of them as they were going through school, institutions, and everything. And
Yeah.
we all start out very creative, and then we're told, stop with the stupid ideas and do your algebra or whatever. So, and it's the same in business. You're the new guy in the company. You raise your hand, and they say, "What do you want?" "Well, I have this idea." "Well, not yet. You haven't been here for 4 years." So you pretty much dampen down people's excitement about new and different and a little edgy and a little scary. So making that first decision is probably 50% of the whole level of effort.
Wow.
The second thing is you decide that what you want to do from a standpoint of how well you want to do it. So it's the difference between being an amateur and a professional. Do you want to have fun and do it like a lifestyle type thing and all that? And that's one whole set of requirements to get to that. And then you set off, that's your battle plan, right? If you want to be professional, then okay, we got to make a certain amount of money, we got to hit certain metrics, we got to do all this, and then that's your battle plan. And a friend of mine who was a scratch golfer and never got into the PGA, but I used to be really frustrated. He goes, "Well, when you were a SEAL, did you just go out and shoot a pistol or rifle like once every 6 or 8 months, a couple rounds, like 18 rounds or 20 rounds, and then you said, okay, I'm good to go?" Well, I said, "No. What'd you do?" We shot 10,000 rounds a year, easy, across
Wow.
7 different weapons, in all kinds of different conditions and all kinds of different, all this other stuff." And he goes, "And you were a professional. You were good, right?" I said, "Yeah." "Why do you think it'll be different with golf?" And I just looked at him. He goes, "You got a choice to make." And I think I was 38 or something. He goes, "You have a choice to make. You
Yeah.
can golf because it's fun and you like to get out in the fresh air and have fun, hang out with people for pleasure, or you can golf because you want to be a professional, you want to win, and you want to kick ass and have some incredible scores. If you do that, you better be on the range for 2 to 3 hours, 4 days a week, and you better be playing 4 or 5 rounds of coached and mentored golf. And it's going to take you 2 to 3 years to get to the point where I'm like, I'll take the first one. So that's a big part of the decision too,
Right.
is because the level of commitment and the level of expense and the level of competition and everything is so much radical difference between going down the professional path as opposed to going down the lifestyle path.
That's
And you
so
run into
true.
Yeah.
businesses that are basically lifestyle businesses. They don't want to sell, they don't want to grow, they just want to have fun, they want to take a paycheck and okay, and that's what they want, and they're happy doing it. And their vision should be exactly what they're executing already. Happiness and a paycheck. Somebody else's vision is, I want to have one store, then 4 stores, and 5 stores, and okay, then that's your vision, and that's what you need to pursue.
Hmm.
Wow.
Uh, that is that is true. Marty, I want to ask something going back a bit to like leadership, decision making, and the question is relating to the gut instincts. So I feel like this is something that Navy SEALs also have, especially from the way you were describing your story that you shared with us. What is it about the gut instinct and like why is it an important skill to have, and why is it an important skill to follow as well? Like, why do you have to follow it?
So the scary truth about gut instincts, just like the scary truth about wisdom, is you have either one of them because you have been exposed to lots and lots of failure.
Hmm.
It's very difficult to have that gut instinct if you've never been afraid, if you've never screwed up, if you've never heard the footsteps coming up behind you. You know, it's those instincts are visceral because they're emotional, and the emotional part of your brain is talking to your intellectual part of your brain and saying, "I've seen this before.
Mm.
I've either lived it before, I've heard about it before, I've read about it before, I've seen this before."
Mm-hmm.
And it's telling you, pay attention. You know, this is something you need to, pay attention to. And in wisdom, the definition sometimes is put out there as the sum total of all your mistakes. So the wiser you are, the more you've made mistakes. But and it's cliche now, you have to learn from those mistakes. You don't get crushed by them. You don't give up because of them. You'll learn. And the more you learn, the fewer gut instinct moments you have. If you succeed, you continue to succeed. But sometimes there's things that you don't run into all the time, every day, every week, maybe every couple of years. For example, let's say you have a psycho employee and
Yeah.
you went through it once. You went through it once 10 years ago, and it's a manager, and they tested well and looked great on paper, and they interviewed well, and you had 5 or 6 people interview them, and everybody's like thumbs up, they're a great fit. And then they turned it into some kind of multiple personality person, and
Yeah.
the room, the HR room's filled with a line going out of people complaining about them, and they're not doing their job, and they're all kinds of, and then you try to get into it, and then you got to get lawyers involved because it turns out they're going to try to countersue you for not, upholding their employee contract and blah, 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 blah. And then you finally put it all to bed. 8
Yeah.
years later, somebody comes in the room and tells you that they're having a problem with this guy they hired a year ago, and they start relaying some of the information, and your gut goes,
Mm.
yeah, it's one of those scenarios.
Yeah.
Get rid of them now. Get rid of that person now. Don't go down this path, because that's what I'm saying. That's the exercise of it. It's usually not some mystical thing. It's not a gift from the gods or anything like that. It's there because you earned it, and when it pops up again, you should listen to it because you don't want to have to go through earning it a second time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and and in business, it's somebody comes in and says, "Hey, I've got this wonderful sales plan," and they lay it all out, and you've maybe 3 times you failed at the same approach. They don't know that. They don't know your history, but you're listening to it and you're hearing like it's like an echo effect of 2 other recordings. And you remember, oh, I've been down this road before. I backed the sales manager, or I backed the manufacturing manager, and then it all went to hell in a handbasket, and I had to clean up the mess and everything. And here we go. And why does that happen over and over again? Because humans are humans, and human nature is human nature. So history repeats itself not because it's history, but because it's the behavior of human beings creates history.
Right.
So you are always going to have that crazy employee pop up as long as you stay in business long enough. And you're
Yeah.
always going to have that salesperson that gives you great promises and all that, and then fails to execute or perform or deliver anything. It's just going to happen because they're just human beings. You're the luck of the draw.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's true.
Saeed, what did we learn today?
Well, we learned a lot about gut instincts, strategy, leadership, being in a team. Um, Marty, thank you so much for sharing all of your insight, all of your information. Um, is there a message that you want to leave our audience with?
The message I usually try to leave people with is you're never, life's not short. Life's actually very long. Make an investment in yourself. There's lots of people that have regrets when they get to the end of a long life, but the regrets are because they never took themselves seriously and they never reinvented themselves when they needed to. So you can
Mm-hmm.
reinvent yourself. You live 60 years, 70 years, you could have 4 or 5 professions. You could have multiple professions and multiple hobbies in parallel. You can be an oil painter, you can be a surfing instructor, and you can be an accountant. There's no limit. There's no set way to live a life, and there's no specific rule that says you have to do the one thing your parents told you to do, or the one thing you got your college degree in, and that's it forever. So be flexible, be adaptable, and try new things, even if it's for 4 or 5 or 6 years. If you're 60 years old and you want to become a lawyer, you'll be 63 when you get out of law school. Just think about that.
Wow.
Damn. Wow. I'm mind blown. Marty, can I ask for one favor for you before we close this episode?
Sure.
Can you ask our audience members to please subscribe to this podcast so that they can watch you, learn from you, and more people like you? I just need that one request.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody should subscribe and watch the A2, the show.
Let's do it. All right. Love it.
All right. Thank you so much, Marty, for coming onto the
Thank you.
show. This is how we end it. We salute to cover the camera, and peace.
All right, guys.